Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sharon Bonney. I'm the CEO of the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to our webinar today, Best Practices for Teaching Online. And this webinar is brought to you through our partner, Essential Education. We're super grateful to them for their partnership. They have really made it so, first of all, it's free. But second of all, there's a number of other areas where they have sponsored and supported the field of adult education. So I want to turn this over to Dan Griffith from Essential Education. Dan?
Hi, Sharon. Thank you. And welcome, everybody. We're excited to be able to work with COABE on another webinar series and some of the other projects that we have going with them. It's just great to be associated with you all and the professionalism you bring to the field and the commitment and heart that you bring to the field as well. Just a couple of things I'd like to mention at the beginning of this. First is, in many ways, Essential Education's programs are really tailored to distance learning. And so immediately as this kind of virus changed our educational situation in adult ed, we started running transitioning to distance learning webinars, which are designed to help you really kind of make that first step from a face-to-face situation to a distance learning situation. And we've been running those for, I think, about 3 weeks now. We do have 2 sessions next week, April 21st and April 23rd. These are Pacific times. These are free webinars open to anyone, so feel free to connect on those if you'd like to participate. We're also really excited because we are almost finished putting together a 6-part series on distance learning and adult education. These will be recorded webinars that you can watch at any time. I'm really excited because we sat down and mapped out kind of a scope and sequence for helping teachers make that full transition across to distance learning and look at some of the tools that they need to start with. And not only did we as a company create, I think, 4 of the 6 webinars, but we contracted with teachers who actually use our programs to do 2 of the webinars. One that's kind of a, what we're calling like a 201 level in working with programs and distance learning, and then one that's really an advanced level on using the reports and the data to inform instruction. And those are from actual users of our program, teachers and administrators in the classroom. And as a former teacher, it's always helpful to hear someone who's actually using it and not just the company sales approach to things. So you can get to either of those by going to essentialed.com/educators and /distance-learning-update. And then if you can go to the next slide, Sharon. The other thing we would just like to mention is, as a company, we wanted to do what we could to contribute to this need to move to distance learning. And so we created 2 bundles of programs that are really tailored to students working at home to begin with. And that's our Adult Basic Education plus High School Equivalency Bundle. We dropped the price to our absolute lowest. It's only $7.63 per seat. And that license is short term. It gets you to June 30th. And if you're in need of that kind of a transitional program, you're not quite sure, you need to get students learning, but you maybe you don't have a program that's designed for distance learning, this is a very low entry cost and allows you to start using a program that's really designed for that quickly. And then we also did the same thing with our Workforce Readiness Bundle, which includes our Computer Essentials, Work Essentials, and Money Essentials programs, all 3 of which create certificates for students, and that's only $8 a seat. And our feeling was that by June 30th, you would have a much better vision of what the new normal will be like for you going forward. And so these licenses are, again, very low cost. Not a huge commitment for you, and then by the time you get to June 30th, you would know kind of where you need to go from there. And so if we can be of service in either way, if you'd like more information about these bundles, demo seats, feel free to reach out to me, Dan at essentialed.com, or hit our website, essentialed.com/educators, and we'll be glad to be in touch with you. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Dan. We really appreciate it. Appreciate all that you're offering to the field. So I just have 2 quick slides here, folks. And while I go to these slides, I would like to encourage you all to introduce yourself in the chat box. So quickly, we have this Advocacy April, which is where we are encouraging everybody to reach out to the legislators. And why? Because there are a lot of needs in the field now due to the challenges of COVID. This COVID challenge, as you know, has presented all types of financial issues for programs. Lots of issues with trying to get their programs up online, get their adult learners to have the Wi-Fi access and the computer, the laptop access that they need. So really want to encourage you that we have a webinar coming up next week on April 21st at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. Join us for that webinar. You're going to have some wonderful tips on how you can help. It's only 1 hour of your time, and we really can work together as a field to move the needle for funding for adult education. We also have a number of webinars coming up that are targeted specifically for dealing with the challenges of COVID-19. You can find out details at coave.org on those. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to today's presenter, Yesenia Lorenzo, and I'm going to read her bio real quick to you, and then I'll pass this off to her. So Yesenia has worked in adult education for the last 8 years, is currently a doctoral student at USC Rosher School of Education. Her research and teaching focuses on understanding technology integration by assessing key aspects of the teacher's technology proficiency and needs. Her research has focused largely on investigating the technology integration barriers that educators face in the training they have received. Her goal is to find possible areas of improvement to advance distance education in adult learning settings. So with that, I now introduce to Yesenia Lorenzo. Yesenia?
Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'm going to be sharing my PowerPoint. So today I'm going to be presenting on best practices for teaching. Thank you, Sharon, for presenting me. So I wanted to share some of the research on best practices. I've been working with OTAN's Leadership Academy for the last 2 years, and OTAN basically works with agencies to provide training, technology training. So I've been working with them, and I wanted to share that they're also available for resources. So I wanted to start with a quote, and the quote is, it says, "Technology will never replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great educators can be transformational." One of the things that I found when I was working with a lot of our teachers across multiple disciplines was that sometimes teachers felt a little bit intimidated by technology, or they felt that maybe, especially in adult education, that they were being replaced by computers. But really, technology can enhance our learning, and the more our teachers are able to use technology and understand technology, the more transformational we can make our educational setting. So I wanted to share our best practices. So I'm going to start with best practice number 1, and kind of review the agenda a little bit. So we're going to be reviewing some empirical best practices for online teaching, and also discussing how we can apply these best practices in our classroom. So our best practice number 1 will be to be present in the course. So the first best practice that research has shown us is to be present in the course site. Time and time again, research has proven that teacher presence is the key to retention and student participation. So liberal use of the instructors' use of communication, tools such as announcements is going to help our students connect. Discussion boards, forums to communicate, students will connect to the faculty members. And it also shows, as we're present in the course, it also shows that we care about our students, we care about who they are, we're concerned with their questions, and we want to show them that we're generally present to do mentoring for them. One of the things I wanted to share is that according to study surveys, the best online instructors are those who show their presence multiple times a week, or at best daily. So this is where we want to set up some clear expectations as to when we're going to be present and when we're not. Especially as we're transitioning from our face-to-face classrooms, this is going to be really important because we want to set those clear course policies and expectations. You know, having your office hours available is going to reduce the amount of daily presence or the amount of messages that you're answering to on a daily basis. So setting regular times where you can meet in a virtual classroom or be available by email. Texting is notifying our students, when are we present, when are we there? If we're used to having our face-to-face classroom, you know, from 8 in the morning until 12, do you want to set up those as your regular office hours? Or do you just want to be available from 10 to 12 and kind of let your students know those are the office hours, or those are the times when I'm going to be responding to messages, or I'm going to be responding to you know, any assignments that you need to grade. One of the biggest things, especially with teachers, as they're transitioning right now, they are starting to get overwhelmed from the number of messages, because you get messages all throughout the day. We have messages coming in at midnight. So we want to make that clear expectation of when we're going to return those messages. As we do that, we're building on our students' attributions. So the attributions are the inferences that our students make about their behavior. An example, students are likely to persist in their efforts at learning when they feel they are in control. So we want to build our online practices to be supportive and caring relationships with our students. And through that, it's that relationship that you're having with them. So they are able to build their attributions and feel that they are in control of their learning, even though it is online. And we've kind of changed the format that we're delivering that educational experience to them. So how can we do this? So we can build our presence in the course by setting those clear expectations. According to study surveys, the best online we know that the best online instructors show their presence multiple times a week, or at least daily. So setting the clear expectations as to when you will be present and when you will not is going to be important. Setting course policies is very helpful, and it can reduce the need of you answering questions every hour. Setting regular times when you can meet or when you will be available by email, again, is going to be important. So our number one practice would be, you know, also utilizing your announcements every week. What are the expectations for this week? One of the things that I like to do with my classes is I send out a quick video. So I take a video even with my cell phone, and it's just like a 2-minute video, just kind of giving the announcement for the week, letting them know what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be studying, what assignments are due that week. And that really helps make that connection with the students when they see my voice and my face, and I'm letting them know what I'm expecting from them. The other things that you can use is discussion postings to interact with the students. I think a lot of what I've seen in the past is some instructors will post a discussion posting, but it's only the students that interact in it. So we want to have that teacher preference, just presence, just as if we would in the classroom, where we are answering those questions and we're having that dialogue with our students, just as we would in a face-to-face classroom. So we're going to move on to best practice number 2. So another best practice that we want to have with our students is to create a supportive online course. So a good strategy for developing a supportive online course community is to design a course with a balanced set of dialogues. This means designing a course so that the 3 dialogues of faculty to student, student to student, and student to resources are about equal. So we want our students to be able to interact with the whole online community. So teacher to student, in most cases, the dialogue of instructor to student is provided in these ways. So we want to create mini lectures, either in text or video. So if you're going to post a PowerPoint for your students or a video, we usually recommend anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. Once we make those videos longer, it's harder to keep the attention span of our learners. And also breaking up that lesson into mini chunks or the mini lectures allows for the processing of the students' learning. We can create mini podcasts for them if we're just doing audio videos for them. Weekly coaching sessions or reminder announcements are also very helpful to keep that communication between the teacher and student. What I do is I have a 1 hour session where I call it my, my tutoring and coaching session with my students, and I just set it up, open room for them so they can just come in and ask those questions that they have. In addition, creating those expectations and interactions with the students. What do we expect? What type of questions are okay to ask in the certain formats that we're expecting them? And, is it a discussion chat, or do we want them to come to our coaching sessions? Where do we want them to ask these questions? So we do need to set up those expectations with them. Another form of communication would be the student to student. So 3 strategies that can be used to encourage student to student engagement and building course community. So in online learning, we want to develop 3 types of presence. So we want to develop a social presence, a teaching presence, and a cognitive content presence. So launch the class with a personal interaction posting so that students can get to know each other and get to know you. You want to know where your student heads are at, especially with everything that is happening right now in our world. We want to give that space where they are able to come into the classroom and express some of the feelings that they're having. So maybe opening up your class with a quick, where's everybody at, a warm up as if you would in your typical face-to-face classroom. Because many times they can share information that's going to be helpful to other students. Some types that are often shared, some of the types of information that are often shared can be personal experience, or you can share your personal experience of what you're going through. Some of the pictures, you can share different pictures of things that you've done, or even in the beginning of your course, share your teaching philosophy, where, what do you believe about the online teaching experience? Set up an open forum. Another way that you can create this interaction is by setting up an open forum for students to post and request help and assistance from each other. So students can also use this forum to problem solve. So if you have an open forum where students are able to post questions, sometimes the students themselves are able to answer each other's questions. So they build that community. They begin to help each other. Maybe one of the students knows how to do something, and they're able to post their instructional video and post it up for a different student. So sometimes our students are the most helpful in the classroom, and they'll be the ones that will also help us spread the word about a specific content that we're trying to teach our students, or try and show them how to do something online. The other thing you can do, and this is one thing that I love doing with my students, is setting up small groups where students can assume responsibility and supportive mentoring to each other. So one of the things that I do is I always split up my classes into 4 or 5 students in small groups. I have them exchange email and phone information so they are able to kind of get a little text group going. And I hold them accountable for mentoring each other in many ways. And this works a little bit better, not so much in the lower level ESL classes, but across the board when we're thinking about ASC, HSC, or CTE students. They are really helpful with one another. And that also helps with some of the questions that are coming to you, like what was on the syllabus this week, or do you remember the assignment? They text each other and they can get those answers very quickly. But more than anything, I've realized that it really builds that community online, and it allows them to interact. And once they have that community presence, they seem to engage, and they have higher retention rates than when students are working completely on their own. So practice number 3 is to share a clear expectation for your students and yourself. So this best practice cannot be overemphasized. Include on your course site a set of expectations for how students communicate, dialogue online, and how they communicate with you. So you want to set these clear expectations by posting something, especially as you transition your class online. Maybe you need to stop and think, what do I expect my students to do? How do I want them to communicate with each other? What are some of those ground rules that we need to set in our online format that maybe we had in our face-to-face classroom? For example, many faculty tell students that they can expect the response within 24 hours during the week, and maybe your students may want to know that on weekends you don't have access to your email, or you don't have access to responding to their messages, so they're aware. Online learning is just as intensive as learning face-to-face, and time to do work needs to be scheduled and planned for, just as if you were attending face-to-face classes. So being clear as how much effort and time will be required on a weekly basis keeps surprises to a minimum. So also telling our students, how long do we expect them to do that work online? If we're expecting 30 minutes each day, or are we expecting an hour each day? What is the expectation? One of the things that I do for each of my lessons is I always put an average amount of time that it takes for them to finish. So for example, if I have a small quiz that has 10 problems on it, I might put, average time of completion is 15 minutes. So then they know once they start that activity, it takes about 15 minutes to complete. Another practice that research has showed us is that a community works well when there's a variety of activities and experiences. Online courses can be more enjoyable and effective when students have the opportunity to brainstorm and work through concepts and assignments with more than one other student. At the same time, some students work and learn best on their own. So building in options and opportunities for students to work together and individually is highly recommended. Some of the practices that we can do, or some ways that we can utilize this practice in our classrooms, would be large group, is having that large group discussion board where everybody has to post to a specific question that has to do with the content. So that would be your large group. Small group, some of the things that I use for small group interaction would be maybe a Google document where 3 or 4 students are working in the same Google document. They're responsible for doing an activity together. They're all able to log into that document and collaborate together at the same time. And then for individual experiences would be all of your content work that maybe they're doing a matching activity or a writing assignment, anything that they're able to do. This also gives them a practice where they're able to think critically together and kind of share ideas, or read what others are thinking at that same time. What this creates is working in different ways creates that collaborative learning. So when instructors actively interact and engage with students in a face-to-face classroom is going to be the same as our online classroom. The class development as a learning community is going to also be built through our online learning. Developing intellectual and personal bonds is going to be important. So the same type of bond happens in that online setting. So start the class. One of the ways that we can do this is to start the class with that discussion that we talked about earlier, making it a personal question and coming in so students can kind of start building those individual connections of with one another. Research has also told us that multiple online courses almost always use asynchronous activities. It is important to use tools we have in the course management systems. So for example, using virtual live classrooms as we use through Zoom or through any other platform that allows you to have a live classroom with your students online. Using your audio tools to make it possible to do almost anything that we do in a face-to-face classroom. So being online doesn't have to feel any different than being in a face-to-face classroom. As far as the students are engaging, we want to create that same environment. Plus, we often engage learners in more collaborative and reflective activities, and what happens is recorded and archived for review. So say, for example, most live classrooms have an option to record. So sometimes if we post those recordings for our students, if one of the students is not able to come, they're able to come back and look at the video to review that classroom that they missed. Or our own students sometimes may have been distracted, or they may have missed a part of an assignment, so they can come back to that recording and allow them to individually review the recording of the class and be able to do that assignment. So there's nothing better than real-time interaction for brainstorming and sharing discussions, but we need to be able to create that same environment for our online learners. For example, try real-time problem solving. A question and answer session can be very effective in the learning experiences of our students. One of the things that we want to build on as far as we have individual activities and group activities that we're doing together as a live class, really our goal is to build our students' self-efficacy. So the self-efficacy is one's beliefs of one's abilities to succeed or achieve a specific goal. Building their self-efficacy is going to be so important because they're going to be able to believe that they're able to do this work online. A positive learning environment can play a crucial role in building self-efficacy among the students. So we want to provide instructional support such as scaffolding. If we're just starting to build our online course, start small, start with baby steps. Maybe the first step is to just have them watch the video and ask the question, how many students watch the video? The next one is maybe to add a small quiz to it. Once they watch the video the first time, the next assignment would be to watch the video again and then answer a small quiz and kind of build as you're giving them activities, because just as instructors and as we're learning technology, so are our students. This is a new platform for them. So we want to scaffold things very slowly and build activities upon one another. Once we know they've mastered how to watch a video, then we want to add the next activity on top of that, which would be taking an online quiz. The next activity might be matching. And then after that, we have them do that all over again to make sure that they've mastered those technical competencies. And maybe we add a collaborative activity where they click on a link and then they go into a document and work together with 3 other students. So for them, it also becomes exciting because not only are we teaching content, but we're also teaching those technical skills that some of our students may not have. So we want to provide them with those multiple activities, you know, that scaffolding that's going to make things small steps at a time and easy, and build their self-efficacy so it can influence their motivation. The more we make them feel like they can do this, they have the ability to do this, the more successful they will become at doing each activity. So along with that, I think we need to provide our students with a lot of praise, and you know, maybe those baby steps need to be acknowledged, and you know, send out a message and say, you know, to your class, you know, 80% of the class was able to click on the video. You know, those of you that are still having trouble, come to my coaching session and I will show you how to click on that video. So just providing that opportunity to build their self-efficacy is gonna allow them to move further in the course, build retention, build motivation to wanna keep doing those activities. Another best practice is to get early feedback. So the course evaluations have been called post-mortem. So evaluations are often done at the end or after the fact that the students have learned the content. And really what happens is once we get our course evaluations at the end of our course, we really can't make too many changes to the current class that just left us, right? So even if we wanted to increase satisfaction or we wanted to facilitate learning in a better way, the course has been completed. So one of the best practices is to get early feedback. So after each class, one of the things that I did once I transitioned my class online is I take a really quick survey at the end of each class that's just 2 or 3 questions, asking them how they felt about the activities for that day, or asking them how they felt about the technology we used that day. It's kind of an informal survey that you're taking after each class, or you can do it once a week, once a month, but it's real-time feedback that you can use to work with the course that you're currently working on. And especially for most of our instructors right now, we're moving our classes from face-to-face to online. So you're kind of learning how your students are doing in an online platform. And this is all very new. So you want to collect that new data. How are your students learning? How do they feel about what they learned? What do they think of the way that we're presenting the online work to them? So we can get feedback to change it. As we move our classes online, it should kind of remind us of our first year teaching. If any of you remember what it was like the very first year you taught, you know, coming into the classroom with minimal resources, and you were kind of just the chapter ahead of the students. This is kind of what's happening with our transition to online right now. We are a chapter ahead of our students, trying to post what they're gonna learn or trying to build our curriculum for that week. So that ongoing feedback from our students is gonna be so important so we can modify. And even moving forward, as we continue to utilize an online platform, you know, I really recommend getting as much course feedback throughout your course because our students are gonna change. Every group of students that we have is gonna be different. So what works for one group may not work for the next. So I'm not against taking a course survey at the end, but I really believe that taking course surveys throughout your course teaching is definitely more relevant and will definitely help you maintain that connection with our students. Another best practice is our discussion boards. So discussion in an online course are equivalent to class discussions in a face-to-face. A key difference, of course, is that these discussions are done individually, providing time for thought and reflection from our students, but they also require writing, video or audio responses to become part of it. So don't be afraid to utilize other resources for your class discussions. So class discussion boards have been a staple of online courses. So most online courses have some type of class discussion. The ultimate goal is to get students talking. And one of the things that we want to do is make these class discussion posts informative and fun for them. One of the things that I do is I come up with different ways for the class discussion. Maybe the first post, they just have to post simple information. The second post, they have to upload a little video. Of course, your technology access is going to be different, but we can provide our students with alternative ways. So they can either post a discussion post, or they can post a little video. Maybe they can post a picture instead. So then you have a lot of different ways that they're able to reflect and respond to your question. So we want to convey that clear expectation, of course, of what are we expecting. If they're just posting a reflection in writing, what is our word count for it? How much are we expecting them to write? If it's a small video, then how many minutes, right? Provide feedback and coaching. As we discussed before, don't eliminate your discussion boards and allow just your students to post. The teacher should be interacting with those posts just as we do in a face-to-face classroom. One of the things that I do encourage my students through discussion boards is to take notes, because sometimes they will get great content inside those discussion points. And one of the things that I do when we have our live session is, what did we learn from the discussion post? Who can share something that we learned from that discussion post, and let's discuss it further. And then I also pull up the discussion post during our live meetings sometimes and point out specific things that I really enjoyed reading, or that I thought were really important, or content that I feel they really needed to know about. So I wanted to share a couple of research that discusses the design of online forums. So we want to provide open question and answer forum. So we want to model probing questions to our students as, why do you think that? That's one of my favorite questions to ask during the discussions. Why do you think that? Or what do others think about this? Just as we would in the regular classroom. I would ask clarifying questions that encourage students to think about what they know and don't know. I do like to stagger due dates in the responses. So one of the things that I do is I stagger the due dates, especially if you're expecting your students to respond to one another. I may have the initial response due on a Wednesday, and then a classmate response due on a Friday. So they kind of have to go back and read some of the other responses that other students have provided. And limit the questions that solicit basic facts only, for which a yes or no response is required. So sometimes if our questions are a little bit too easy, our students tend to just type yes or no, or I really like it. So we want to stay away from those questions, and we also want to teach our students to stay away from those discussion comments. So sometimes I will need to go back into my discussion board and ask my students, like, okay, explain this a little bit further. Can you give me an example of what you're thinking? Allowing them to discuss further what their thought process is. So as we move, our practice number 8 is if content is not digital, sometimes it doesn't exist to our students, especially in this time when we're dealing with so much stress throughout our world. A lot of our students don't have access to their book. Most of our adult education classes have a class set of books, or they have books in the classroom that they share with multiple classes, so they're not able to take them home. So I would say a large portion of my adult education students just utilize the book we have in class. So this means that content that students will need to use is not available to them directly. So one way that we can help our students is to provide links, utilize some of our current events, news articles, where we can share the link with our students and allow them to be able to access that content from anywhere, from their mobile device, their smartphones, their tablets, their computers. So providing that link to our students is going to be easy, where they can just click on the link, maybe read an article and answer some questions to it. So I think that's one of the biggest things as we're transitioning over, is to remember that they're not learning that content from the book right now. So whatever we teach our students, we need to provide that content through a very easy access where they can just click, retrieve. Most of our students don't have printers at home either. So as we want to be mindful as we're sending those PDF documents, some of our students are not going to have access to printing the documents that we're sending them. And what are our chances of them copying everything on our PDF in their notebook, right? So we need to make sure that the information that we are giving them is very accessible, and it's something easy that they can click on and read. Especially, and the other thing is it makes it really accessible for them to learn anywhere, right? I remember as I was learning English myself, I mean, there were times when I was sitting outside in a parking lot with my cell phone, and I had to learn, you know, I had to learn through my cell phone, and I had to read articles and read material from a very small screen. So we want to be able to give those students access to that material. And one of the things we're building on is their expectancy value, right? We want to encourage our students. So when we talk about expectancy value theory, this tells us that attitudes are developed and modified based on the assessment of their personal beliefs and their values. As we give our student those tasks, so if we're asking them to do something, if we're providing content for them, we want to make sure that our students value that content. Why is it relevant to them? Why is it important to them? The task that we assign must have a value to our students, because the task value refers to the student's perception of the interest, usefulness, importance, and cost. So remember, especially right now when we have all of our adult learners at home with their family members, their little ones, elderly parents that they need to take care of, stopping to read content or stopping to watch our 5-minute video is cost to them. It's their family cost. And even you know, when we're not in COVID-19 mind frame, I think it's still a cost to our students. So we want to make sure that what we are teaching our students has value to them, something that they want to learn. So we want to make sure that it gives them that utility value that helps them develop specifically what they want, especially if we're looking at ESL learners, right? They want to learn those life skills. So we want to teach specific skills that they're really interested in and they really want to learn. So practice number 9, this is another one of our best research practices, is to combine core concepts with learning, with your personalized learning. So this best practice combines a number of basic learning principles, explained in length, and other resources. So as we're teaching them a specific content, we want to make sure that we explain it really clearly to them and connect it to their past experiences. So very briefly, it means that faculty identify the core concepts to be learned in a course, the performance goals, and then mentor learners through a set of increasingly complex and even customized projects applying to those core concepts. So right now, as we are in a mind frame where it's very stressful, we want to decide what is the core learning objectives that we want to teach our students. And we want to support our learners with their personal goals that are to closely link them to their performance. So we want to create that win-win mind frame where learners are feeling that they're individually learning something in class that they need during this time. So building experience which pace and the approach are adjusted to meet our student needs of individual students and in which learning is tied to the student interest and experience. So I think especially right now, and we'll discuss this in the next slide, you know, our students are overwhelmed with everything that they're hearing on the news, social media. So we wanna make sure that our expectation is high, but it also changes a little bit to individualize our learning for this specific time. Our pacing guide may not be the same as the pacing guide that we had in our face-to-face classroom. So, you know, in our face-to-face classroom, we may have done a lesson every day and taught a specific content learning objective in one day and felt confident that our students had mastered it. During this time, we want to adjust that to meet their needs. Maybe one learning objective may take the whole week. So we want to keep that in mind. And I wanted to share a little bit about Vygostsky and kind of bring back to our own learning experience when we learned about Vygostskian theory. And we remember that concepts are not works, but rather organized and intricate knowledge clusters. So another key principle that aids in learning comes from Vygotsky. So he notes that this means that while we teach in a linear fashion, presenting concepts individually and in small clusters, we need to apply concepts within real life situations. So I would highly encourage you to utilize what is happening in our world right now to link some of your content into what is going on in your individual student lives. So a popular new technique and learning mantra advocates making students' thinking visible. Making our thinking visible requires students to create, talk, write, explain, analyze, judge, report, and inquire. So these activities make it clear that students know there's their own growth and concept of awareness and content acquisition. So as we do this, and this can be done through our discussion forums, through our blogging, journals that our students are keeping, our small group work, all of those are excellent strategies for engaging learners in clarifying and enlarging their mental models and concepts as they build links and identify relationships. So that's going to be one of the key things of making them really create some of this knowledge, talking through it, then writing through it, explaining why, how they're linking that knowledge to prior knowledge, and then analyzing it. So they're able to report on it and then have inquiry about other concepts that they're learning. So as Vygostsky tells us, we want to make sure that interest is important. Learner interest matters. That's going to be one of the key areas that we want to concentrate on as educators. So one of the things that we know is that student readiness, their willingness, their readiness, plus their interest equals student engagement in our classroom. So most of our students that are in the classrooms right now, they have that readiness, they have that eagerness and the want to learn something new. Now it's our job as educators to build that interest so we can totally engage them in their learning. Promote choice. By giving student choices, it allows them to decide their path in learning. So one of the things that you can do, even though we're teaching online, you can still have task cards. You can still have 2 or 3 different assignments that maybe students can learn from or have a choice of which ones they want to do. One of the things that I love doing is giving my students learning menus, you know, where they kind of get to pick and choose what topic they're going to work on that week. My learning objectives may be the same, but they're able to choose from different topics. And then maybe learning centers also help, and connecting those students that have the same learning interest will also help you kind of stay organized within your online classroom. One of the things I wanted to talk about with principle number 9 is, as we customize learning for our students, is principles for information processing. So when we look at information processing theory, it's really focusing on the idea that humans process the information they receive from the environment where they're learning from. So a student's brain brings information, they manipulate the new information, and then they store it for future use. So this is where we are going to come in as instructors and provide that meaningful and connect our new content to prior knowledge. Frequent practice. So we want to give frequent practices in different ways. Maybe the first way is a multiple choice. The second way is matching. So you want to give that same content in multiple ways so they can develop that mastery. and assist in them being able to do it on their own in the same way that we talked about scaffolding some of our information. And I just have a couple more slides and then we'll go through some questions. I know this is a lot of information, so I'm trying to get through all of it for you. I did want to discuss principles of cognitive load theory. So cognitive load theory refers to the amount of working memory resources. So it suggests that effective instructional material facilitates learning. So I think we're all going through a little bit of cognitive overload. Because we're all learning, we're all, we're dealing with what's happening around us, and we're trying to teach something new to our students. So we want to present information in manageable parts, provide pre-training on complex contexts. And this is where it becomes important as we choose a form of distance learning that we are going to teach our students. So let's just say, I know a lot of our ESL teachers in my district are, for beginning level ESL, are currently just using Remind to teach our students. So we want to find like a little video, on YouTube on how to students use Remind. And you can probably find training videos on almost any learning platform that you're using, but provide your students with that pre-training video on how to log on to Zoom, how to log on to Remind, how to log on to the learning database that you're using. So students get that pre-training. As you're building your activities in your program, you want to provide your students with pre-training on any new activities that you're giving them, which means having some type of video format or even a handout that gives them a step-to-step of how to do that specific activity or how to get to the information you want to give them. So one of the things that we've been working on a lot in my district is trying to get those step-to-step handouts so we can get them to our students where there's pictures and arrows of where to go next. And this is our last best practice, is to provide a good closing and wrap-up activity for the course. So as the course comes to a close, it is easy to forget the value of a good closing experience in the final weeks of the course. Students are likely to be stressed and not take the time to do the list and the planning that can help reduce the stress to provide the calming atmosphere. And I think as we close our courses this semester, this is going to be a really memorable activity for most of our students. And we really want to think of how we want to close our online course, because that is what they're going to take with them as their experience of them transitioning from a face-to-face to an online. So we want to take the time to remind our students what's next, what we're going to do for that last activity, but I really recommend having some type of activity that's fun for them, something that they can do. One of the things that I'm planning for my course ending is we're working with Google slides, and each student gets one slide and they're going to post pictures of what they have done throughout their stay at home through Stay at Home Safe. So they're going to be putting pictures and a small description of something that they learned through the online learning management system, or something that they learned from transitioning to a face-to-face learner to an online learner. So I think that closing and wrap-up activity is going to help motivate our students and show them that they can do this again in the future. So this is just a couple of more theory or research-based learning online. So we want to ask pre and post questions during studying, provide words and pictures rather than words alone, connect with new information with prior information, present information in a content that is familiar to the students, especially if you've been using a specific content in your face-to-face classroom. Try and make that same content the same because your students are already familiar with it. So then they would feel more encouraged, and they will kind of have that feeling that they can do it on their own. Encourage learners to self-explain and answer deep questions during learners. One of the things I teach my students all the time is how to take notes. Have learners outline, summarize, and elaborate on material, and encourage individuals to test themselves and take practice tests rather than restudy. So this is one of the things that I think we want our students, more students that are in our classroom, we really want them to test themselves on what they are learning, right? We want to make sure that the learning is relevant to them, and we want to make sure that their goals are being met. So that is one thing that I always encourage them. Have we met your goal? And that is a question that most of our students should be able to share with us, so we know where we're coming from. As I wanted to close out with another saying, and one of the things that I have learned from online learning is that through e-learning, we can cover 5 times the material of instructor-led training in the same amount of time. Online gives us lots of resources. It provides us with a lot more space to provide our students with resources and multiple activities for them to practice. So I think I just challenge all the instructors to utilize at least one e-learning platform or one technological tool that they want to share with their students, and just see how much learning you can get out of it. And then I'm going to transition to questions. I want to make sure, I think I took up most of the time, but I want to make sure I get to some of the questions. And I'm not sure if Sharon, if you can help me, do we have time for questions?
We sure do. And while you're looking at those, I'm just going to pull up the poll and have people take our short poll while you're pulling up the questions. Okay, so everybody, the short poll here, just go ahead and take that while Xenia looks at the questions. We would love your feedback.
Thank you, Sharon. And if I don't get to your question, I will answer it privately through the question and answer, but I will try and get through both. So our first question says, I work in a corrections ed. What are some of the recommendations for adult learners who are incarcerated? Ooh, so that's really going to depend on what resources you have available for those students. It may be for their distance learning that we have like learning packets for them, or it's more of handouts that you are providing in a learning packet that is being given out every week. How do you meet the challenges of access to the internet, low-income students who are limited? Wow, so we have a lot of those students. And some of the applications that I usually recommend for some of those students would be to use more of a texting application. If most of your class does not have access to internet, the texting applications are sometimes really easy because you can just send a link, and then the link can be attached to a video, it can be attached to a reading material. So I really like using links, and especially for those students that do not have online access at home. Most of our students have a cell phone that they can use to access some of our material. The vast majority of adult ed learners only have access to smartphones. Any suggestions for best practices there? We have been holding live classes via Zoom, but would like to develop our repertoire of tools a bit more. So if they do have smartphones, then luckily Zoom is available through your smartphone. I think for this question, as far as best practices for Zoom, that would be a whole nother lesson, but I think we can take some of the resources that we learned today to kind of apply them to how we're teaching through Zoom. Some of our teachers do not feel comfortable with recording of the class. What do you suggest? So recording of the whole class session, then in that case, it would be to summarize what we learned and post it somehow for our students. Either you're summarizing and posting directly into the learning management side, or you're summarizing and sending that email out to the students after each class. What are your suggestions for guidelines when it comes to setting contact time? For example, we met Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 11. So I've decided limiting calling students on those days anytime that is good for them, as opposed to Monday through Friday. of course, with expectations as needed. Yeah, the same thing. I think even as instructors, as we're kind of going through this world crisis, our time is also very precious to us. So I think as long as you set up that expectation and you limit the time that you're presenting to your students, they should be really respectful, and they understand that teachers have their own lives too. Oh, do we have time for more, Sharon?
You sure do, yes.
Okay, okay, good. Another one was, are there any models for creating ESL boards for ESL students? And that's going to really depend on their level, right? Their level of English. So you want to make it really easy, and it has to be built through your management, learning management system. So really kind of the questions that you're going to be asking are going to be dependent on their ESL level. What do you suggest for updating course content? I've transitioned to using Blackboard, and I'm feverishly working to upload content. I'm thinking maybe I should continue to upload course content, but make new material available on Mondays. I think that's perfect. And that is one thing that I do. I usually tell my students, what days the new content comes out. If you're posting every Monday, I think that's a perfect way to do it. And that gives you the whole week to process for the following week. How do you keep up the record attendance for your reporting purposes? I think that's really going to depend on your district. And it's going to depend on what their policy is and the learning management system that you are utilizing. And I think that was it.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you. Questions.
I just want to say thank you so much to Yesenia. You did just a fantastic job.
Oh,
and we've seen a lot of wonderful comments from our attendees. So thank you for that. And I also want to remind our attendees that we have webinars coming up next week on the 20th and the 21st. So we're going to have some more webinars here to help you with the challenges of COVID-19, help you get up online, and also help our field get the funding that we need. So with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time. Thank you to Yesenia. And of course, thank you to our sponsor as well, Essential Education. Yes. Bye, everybody. Thank you.